Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel. Thank you so very much for tuning in. Really quickly, before you hear President Trump, AOC, the Supreme Court decisions backing Trump, and the lower courts trying desperately to stop President Trump and his administration, I want to tell you really quickly, before we get to President Trump, you'll hear AOC as well and others. Hit subscribe to this channel. Do my super chat. You're greatly appreciated. Number one, what you're hearing is nonsense. John Roberts did not offer a rebuke of Trump. He did not go after Trump. He simply does not want to side, yet again, with President Trump. The executive branch cannot be told what to do in terms of foreign policy and in terms of immigration laws by a district judge. District judge cannot tell a plane to over international waters, or even a plane that the commander-in-chief orders to go to another country with possible criminals after negotiating a deal with El Salvador. So Nayib Bukele and President Trump have every right to discuss anything they want to under the Constitution of this country, and perhaps the laws, as almost certainly the laws as well, of El Salvador. A judge, a lower court district judge, is not the Supreme Court. It's part of the judicial. He's part of the judicial branch, but he can't decide foreign policy. The Constitution specifically states that the president is the commander-in-chief, has broad authority over foreign policy issues and also immigration issues. That's within the Constitution. The inside story of John Roberts and Trump's immunity win at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court backed Trump against the Colorado State Supreme Court that tried to remove him from the ballot. So that's number one. TRR, hello. Thank you for being subscribed for so long. Greatly appreciated. In addition to that, the Supreme Court backed President Trump on immunity. They tried desperately to imprison Trump because of a speech. A speech is an official act. That's the second major victory. There was another victory regarding January defendants that even Justice Jackson sided with President Trump on. She also sided with Trump. It was a unanimous Supreme Court decision overturning the Colorado ban, which was completely absurd. So lower courts, whether it's the Colorado State Supreme Court or D.C. federal court judges, oftentimes get the Constitution wrong. What they're trying to do is stop President Trump from implementing foreign policy, from enforcing existing immigration laws. We're going to get to that in a second. Really quickly, the Democrats and AOC pushed for impeachment. They also pushed to ignore rulings. This is the impeachment push by AOC. It's exactly what President Trump and Republicans want to do.
Rise today to introduce articles of impeachment against Associate Justices of the Supreme Court Clarence Thomas and Samuel Anthony Alito, Jr. Against Justice Thomas, the resolution includes 3 total articles. 1 count of failure to disclose financial income, gifts, reimbursements, property interest liabilities, and transactions, among other information.
This, of course, is by a progressive, quote-unquote, progressive politician who is totally fine with preemptive pardons of Hunter and the entire Biden clan, dating back a decade, in addition to the pardons of Falsey and the January Committee, Cheney, Schiff, Kinzinger, all of them. But in terms of bribery, potential bribery, graft, enriching themselves potentially. Conflicts of interest also, by the way, pertaining to judges that are ruling against Trump. So she talks about the spouses of Supreme Court justices, the spouses of the judges that have been ruling against Trump for the past 2 years, oftentimes possess oftentimes, let's say, are lifelong Democrats. We'll just leave it at that.
And 2 counts of refusal to recuse from matters concerning his spouse's legal and financial interests before the court. The second resolution includes the following impeachment articles against Justice Alito. one count of refusal to recuse from cases in which he had a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party before the court, and one count of failure to disclose financial incomes, gifts, reimbursements, property interests, among other information.
Failure to disclose income. Where have we heard that before? Oh, that's right. 50 intelligence officials. Then this is why AOC and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are performance artists. They're part of the system that they claim to be against. 50 intelligence officials said that Hunter's laptop was an information campaign by the Kremlin. You'd have to be a complete imbecile to believe that. But AOC and Bernie Sanders believed that. And others, Elizabeth Warren. These are all the wonderful, left-leaning, morally superior vanguards of justice who ignore blatant conflicts of interest from judges all throughout the country, even judges now that are going after Trump and issuing these injunctions. But the executive branch, Article 2 of the Constitution, lays out the executive branch. If AOC wanted to, she could go and simply write a bill protecting undocumented immigrants who potentially committed crimes. Then just push for the bill. Run on that. Campaign on keeping potentially dangerous individuals in the country who are undocumented, who have potentially committed crimes. Campaign and run on that. But they won't do that. By the way, also, go to Open Secrets. AOC takes money from one insurance company. We can go on forever with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, but let's continue.
Mr. Speaker, nomination and appointment to the Supreme Court is one of the highest privileges and most consequential responsibilities of our nation. Such an appointment is uniquely insulated in its power. Confirmation to the court is...
And then we have, really quickly, AOC urges Biden to ignore Texas ruling. She urged the Biden administration to do exactly what supporters of, myself included, supporters of President Trump are telling President Trump to do. In this case, though, it's not the Supreme Court. I would advise President Trump always to just abide by the Supreme Court. Lower courts, if they are acting in an unconstitutional manner, if they are telling the President of the United States, you cannot negotiate a deal with the president of El Salvador, that is unconstitutional. The president has every right, Trump has every right to negotiate any deal he wants to with Bukele if he doesn't need the consent of the Senate. He doesn't need the consent of the Senate to negotiate a transfer of potential criminals or people who are undocumented, who committed crimes. So, and if the individuals were sent by another country, then Bukele and Trump can negotiate a deal under the Constitution to do what they did. That's according to a number of legal scholars, but let's continue. This is AOC not long ago.
I think rulings like this, and I think we've seen from the FDA and also from activity in Congress, that some of these rulings, I think we've been preparing and anticipating for there being these egregious overreaches by members of the judiciary appointed by a right-wing Republican Party whose goal for a very long time was to just pack these courts with partisan judges.
Oh, so the goal of the Democratic Party was not to pack courts with liberal justices or judges? That wasn't the goal of the Democratic Party? Of course it was. So now we're talking about political ideology, and now we're talking about justices and judges that have political ideology directing their decision-making or influencing the decision-making. That's exactly what President Trump is saying. Thank you, AOC. Fantastic. I agree 100% with you.
It's often underqualified or completely unqualified for their role. And so
That's your opinion. None of these judges that are conservative are unqualified. It's your opinion. It doesn't matter if liberal bar organizations and law organizations agree with that. They're mostly liberal-minded and Democrats, lifelong Democrats in an organization run by a bunch of attorneys that say that, oh, this conservative judge is totally unqualified. Who cares? It's your opinion. It's like the Big Lebowski. This is what you think, man. It's just like your opinion, man.
There has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy.
What was that? What was that?
The courts have the legitimacy to, in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling.
The Biden administration should ignore the Supreme Court ruling. Okay. Thank you, AOC, for setting the groundwork for President Trump to ignore lower courts. I don't even agree with the President Trump ignoring Supreme Court decisions. But if AOC is saying the Biden administration should have ignored Supreme Court decisions, I think it's only fair that the Trump administration utilize that same kind of value and logic, logical reasoning. And if they feel, I'm sure AOC would agree, if the Trump administration disagrees with lower courts, not even the Supreme Court, that she also probably would say that that President Trump had every right to ignore what he felt was unconstitutional, an unconstitutional ruling by a lower court, infringing upon his executive branch privileges. So let's continue.
Already issued statements, for example, advising the Republican Party, whose goal for a very long time was to just pack these courts with partisan judges, often underqualified or completely unqualified for their role. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the.
That's something Harris would have said. I don't even understand what you just said at all. But it's a word salad of biblical proportions. The courts rely on their legitimacy, and therefore they're eroding the trust of the people because these decisions are not legitimate in some manner. So, okay, great. Trump agrees with you. AOC, you're the best. Thank you.
Justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
I agree 100%. So is President Trump. Thank you for backing President Trump. The partisan nature of the rulings against Trump are undermining and eroding the actual rulings themselves. I couldn't have said it better myself.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interest.
So let's justify the Biden administration ignoring the Supreme Court so that we can then justify President Trump ignoring lower courts that infringe upon executive branch privileges. Thank you, AOC.
Interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement, and it is up to the.
That's exactly what President Trump is saying. Yes, I love it. AOC, there's nobody better than AOC.
Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But is that?
Thank God Almighty. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's up to President Trump and his administration to decide if they want to abide by lower court rulings. That's according to the Congresswoman.
Do we want to live in a world where a government can decide to ignore a federal court ruling?
Of course. I mean, I do think that it raises these important questions. And I do think that when we look at, and there are serious questions that the FDA and the Biden administration is going to have to figure out and how exactly we map this out. But on the other hand, what we are also seeing is a power grab over our courts in which
I totally agree. They're trying to stifle and they're trying to stop Trump through injunctions. I agree with you 1,000%.
The laws passed by Congress and the rules and policies passed by the executive branch now are going to require unanimous consent from 650 district court judges, many of which are appointed with even, the American Bar Association saying that they're completely unfit for the role.
It is.
So now you need unanimous consent from these partisan judges. President Trump couldn't have said it better. And what can I tell you? Now we have President Trump. AOC echoed the exact sentiment of President Trump. And it only took less than 2 years. So the foundation of President Trump's political defense against lower court judges that overstep their boundaries is everything AOC and Wyden and others just said. When Democrats don't like a ruling, and by the way, Roberts backed Trump with his statement in a roundabout way. He doesn't want to continue defending the executive branch, which he will. The immunity decision not only strengthened the executive branch, which would also strengthen President Trump's ability to enforce immigration laws, but Democrats are so utterly inept. They wanted to remove the power of the executive branch. They strengthened it. And then they're going to want to defend and give more power to the executive branch to defend Biden's preemptive pardons that don't have precedent, that protect people from crimes they didn't commit, haven't committed, no investigations yet, 1,000 years before the pardon was auto-signed, while Biden had no knowledge likely of what was going on. But so they tried to remove power from the executive. Now they're defending the pardons. A couple years ago, AOC and Schumer were going after the Supreme Court saying, don't. And you just heard AOC saying, don't. They can't enforce anything, so don't listen to the Supreme Court. They don't listen to the ruling. Now they're backing the court, and they're happy with Roberts now, and soon they'll be unhappy with Roberts when one of these cases go to the Supreme Court. And by the way, here's the evidence that another country was literally sending organizations here, and so that would apply under the Enemies Act, and so a whole bunch of the executive branch gives President Trump the authority to conduct foreign policy. Okay. To conduct foreign policy, to negotiate with world leaders, and that's what he did with El Salvador's Nayib Bukele. So, and then again, if Democrats don't like this, they don't have to go through the courts. They can pass bills that defend undocumented immigrants who are accused of committing crimes.
We're gonna first hit the other big news of the day, which was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court issued a rare statement about your suggestion.
Lou, thank you. Thank you, Lou.
On Truth that you posted earlier today that Judge James Boasberg should be impeached after he ordered those deportation flights to El Salvador halted, essentially turned around. The Chief Justice said it was more than.
So Trump is echoing AOC, and AOC, thank you for laying the groundwork to strengthen the Trump administration. Only Democrats could do that. Thank you, AOC.
Two centuries, we understood that essentially impeachment was for very rare circumstances and not an appropriate response to rulings you disagree with. What's your reaction? We understood that.
Okay, Roberts is not really. He ruled in favor of President Trump against the Colorado Supreme Court, against the Biden administration on January defendants sentencing, and against Jack Smith and Biden's DOJ on presidential immunity. What do you think he's going to do regarding a ruling of Trump's executive branch privileges and authority and powers within the Constitution that are plainly stated within the Constitution? Okay? What do you think the conservatives, even Amy Coney Barrett, she's not going to look at the Constitution and say, oh, yes, a district court judge has the power to unilaterally decide or prevent an international agreement negotiated by the president and the commander-in-chief of this country. I don't think so. Let's continue.
Essentially, impeachment was for very rare circumstances and not an appropriate response to.
So he has to go to bat for the lower courts because he doesn't want to have to deal with all this nonsense. The Supreme Court's whole thing is they want Congress to pass laws so they don't have to decide on the constitutionality of immigration laws or a foreign policy. Okay, but if it's stated within the executive branch, a lower court cannot overstep its boundaries. Trump is the commander-in-chief. End of story.
Rulings you disagree with. What's your reaction to the courts stepping in to make a statement here? They didn't make a statement when Joe Biden, decided to forgive all those student loans.
Well, he didn't mention my name in the statement. I just saw it quickly. He didn't mention my name, but many people have called for his impeachment, the impeachment of this judge. I don't know who the judge is, but he's radical left. He was Obama appointed. And he actually said we shouldn't be able to take criminals, killers, murderers, horrible, the worst people, gang members, gang leaders, that we shouldn't be allowed to take them out of our country. Well, that's a presidential job. That's not for a local judge to be making that determination. And I thought it was terrible. In fact, he said when they were well on their way, there was an order issued, as I understand it, to bring them back or to not let them go or something. And this is not something that the country would stand for.
So this is Congress.gov, Constitution annotated. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution establishes the executive branch of the federal government. The executive vesting clause in Section 1, Clause 1 provides that the federal executive power is vested in the president. Section 3 of Article 2 further requires the president to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. The executive power thus consists of the authority to enforce laws and to appoint the agents charged with the duty of such enforcement. The president also has distinct authority over foreign affairs. Quote, alone has the power to speak or listen as a representative of the nation. He had every right to speak to Bukele of El Salvador and negotiate a deal regarding the enforcement of immigration laws. As a general matter, the Supreme Court has recognized the Constitution vests the president not only with the authority expressly delineated therein, but also with certain implied authorities, such as the ability to supervise and generally to remove executive officials and the power to recognize foreign governments. So broadly, the court has recognized the executive officers exercise authority to enforce and administer the law, including rulemaking, administrative determinations, and the filing of lawsuits. Section 2 and 3 define specific presidential powers. Section 2, Clause 1 describes exclusive presidential powers, namely the commander-in-chief authority. The power to require written opinions from the heads of executive departments and the party. Okay. Clause 2 defines the powers that the president shares with Congress, outlining the treaty-making power and the appointment power. provides the president, and Section 4 provides that the president and all other civil okay. All right. So that doesn't apply to Trump, more so to Biden. But anyway, the point is the executive branch is run by the president, not by lower courts. And like AOC said, Trump has a good case. I'm not even telling President Trump to ignore any court ruling. He should abide. President Trump should abide by as much as he can by these court rulings. I think he should always abide 100% by the Supreme Court ruling, which, by the way, AOC wanted to ignore. She wanted Biden and the Democrats to ignore the Supreme Court. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say that. But guess what? These injunctions, when they eventually reach the Supreme Court, even Amy Coney Barrett's going to side with Trump. You can't tell a president what he can and can't do in terms of foreign policy. That's not how things work.
These people, they were let in here by an incompetent president who had open borders, and anybody throughout the world could come in. And we were given murderers, we were given people from mental institutions and prisons.
The judge is essentially saying, excuse me, Mr. President, that there still is a process in place. You can read between the lines. It hasn't been a full ruling yet. I know the Justice Department is appealing this on a couple of different grounds, but this is leading people to wonder whether there are court orders that you will defy because you believe that the judge has no jurisdiction.
AOC, less than 2 years ago, said that Democrats should defy the Supreme Court of the United States of America.
Or they're political questions and not justiciable at all. And what would you say to that? Are there circumstances where you would defy a court order?
Well, I think that, number one, nobody's been through more courts than I have. I think nobody knows the courts any better than I have. I would say the chief judge does, but nobody knows them better than I have. And what they've done to me, I've had the worst judges. I've had crooked judges. I have judges that valued Mar-a-Lago at $18 million because that benefited his case, because he wanted to see me convicted of something. I have judges that had relatives making millions and millions of dollars on the election, ruling on the election.
But going forward,
I had judges that were so...
So AOC wanted to impeach justices because of the allegations that spouses were partisan and they benefited financially. So, I mean, AOC is the basis for President Trump's administration in 2025. Thank God. She's very smart.
Court order. We all know that was outrageous.
I never did defy a court order.
And you wouldn't in the future?
No, you can't do that. However, we have bad judges. We have very bad judges. And these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point, you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge? The judge that we're talking about, you look at his other rulings, I mean, rulings unrelated, but having to do with me, he's a lunatic.
He wants details of when flights departed and trying to...
The Justice Department is going to consult with John Ratcliffe and Kash Patel, and they're not going to give the full details or any details because of national security issues, almost certainly. And the judge said, by the way, there's so much public record. I want to know this, that. It's like, you're not going to... It's like... When was the last time these injunctions were leveled against President Obama or Biden? And that's the thing. AOC talked about partisan biased judges that wanted to stifle Biden's administration. It's exactly what President Trump is saying. In this case, though, we're not talking about a Supreme Court decision. See, they were so... They were so outside the boundaries of norms and traditions they claim to care so much about. The Democrats, AOC and others, Wyden and others, were actually saying, don't follow the Supreme Court decision. Ignore it. This isn't even the Supreme Court. These are lower court judges unilaterally trying to stifle President Trump and overstepping their boundaries into the executive branch. That's not these judges have no power to decide foreign policy, for example, which is what was taking place with those flights. That's foreign policy.
I guess they seem to be trying to lay the predicate for your administration having defied a court order. Now, you all have said you haven't given specific times, and you filed a motion in court, your Justice Department, to prevent any more information getting out about specific times of flights. So that seems to be where this is going. Do you have faith that the Supreme Court ultimately will rule in your favor in this case?
I do, because the job of getting people out of our country that are murderers, that are absolutely the worst people, the drug lords are causing such problems in this country. You know, drug lords came in, the biggest of them. They left other countries to come in here. They came through an open border. They're making millions of dollars destroying people's lives, killing people. And that's a presidential thing. We're supposed to be getting them out or getting them brought to justice. We had a judge, I would call him a rogue judge. You can call him whatever you want. I know nothing about him. I heard about this very late in the process, and I said, that's a strange order. You have local judges, local federal judges, period, and DAs and prosecutors, DAs, state attorney generals that want to really take over. I think some of it's for the publicity. They love the publicity. All of a sudden, they're on the front page of every newspaper, but they have no right to be.
When we come back, President Trump reacts to the latest
So when Justice Roberts said don't impeach lower court judges, he was also saying we're going to side with Trump on the executive and the powers within the executive branch. Okay, Democrats tried to imprison Trump because of a speech, because they said that he lied to the country. Well, do you then imprison Biden and Democrats for lying about cognitive issues that forced Biden out? For years, they said there was no problem with Biden. Then they said, oh, my God, we're mortified. The whole country saw him in a debate. Then George Clooney said he'd better get out. We'll never win with him. Well, why not? What happened to all that? He was the most popular candidate of all time. So they have so many sacred cows that are obviously, brittle and made of the most brittle material. They have so many sacred cows they worship. Biden is the most popular candidate of all time. If you question that, you should never have been born. Also, Biden had to leave after he won his primary. That's another thing. They don't even have functioning primaries. But Biden should leave immediately because the country cannot see what we've been hiding for less than 4 years. So we're going to remove him after he won his primary, and now we've told you not to trust your lying eyes, but now it's okay. You can acknowledge the fact that Biden is one fry short of a Happy Meal because George Clooney allowed you to do so, and now we're removing Biden. So now you must vote for Harris, even though she didn't win the Democratic Party primary. So where am I going here? Democrats are all over the place all the time. Don't abide by the Dobbs decision. Abide by the lower court decision against Trump. That's right. Trump should be imprisoned because he lied in a speech about, Weekend at Bernie's winning, and 4 years later, Harris has to be the nominee because, obviously you saw the same Biden we did. Okay, so Trump wasn't lying in his speech. He can't believe he lost to that man. He has every right to be skeptical and suspicious of what the Democrats were doing because they're always conspiring to commit nonsense and corrupt activities all the time. But it's an official act of speech. You cannot imprison a president because of a speech you didn't like. And according to Vivek Ramaswamy and others, there were government involved. There was government involvement that day. Terrible day. I condemn it. I also condemned billions in property damage that Democrats didn't care about that summer. Anyway, let's continue.
Welcome back. Well, the federal judge who ordered a halt on deportation flights carrying hundreds of illegals to El Salvador, he is demanding more answers by noon today from the administration before an upcoming hearing this Friday.
What time? They're not going to answer that. What time to Libya? And they're not going to answer that. What time did it land? They're not going to answer that. What time were individuals subject solely to the proclamation? They're not going to answer that. They're not going to answer any of this. They're going to cite national security concerns. So, and the judge is going to be like, there's a 2% chance that one of these judges issues an arrest warrant for President Trump or other people within his administration. There's like a 2% chance, which would be hilarious because guess who has to enforce it? The DOJ.
The DOJ says the flights did not violate Judge James Boasberg's order to turn the planes around. The department says it's not providing any more information publicly right now to protect sensitive foreign operations. Joining me now is South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson. AG, great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here. And I know you and many AGs across the country are pushing back on this. You're leading a coalition of more than 20 attorneys general, all pushing back against Judge Boasberg. What do you want to see happen here, sir?
Well, first off, it's 26 state attorneys general that have joined our brief to the district court in D.C. to support President Trump's actions and the administration's actions to remove these violent illegal aliens who are actually proxy agents of a foreign government. And I know people throw around the terms invasion, but this is actually if people should look at this more not as a law enforcement operation, but more as a kind of a proxy war by the Venezuelan government. And again, this judge has no more right to go into the Pentagon and tell the judge not to fire a missile at an enemy combatant than he does to tell the president that the president can't weigh on foreign affairs or national security issues. This is a national security issue.
A national security issue about Venezuela and its pushback on America.
By the way, God bless all the Venezuelan immigrants from El Salvador, Mexico, all the Latino immigrants. God bless you and everybody, all the wonderful, hardworking families and beautiful people from Venezuela and other countries. This has nothing to do with, 99.9% of wonderful, awesome, amazing people from Venezuela, from El Salvador, from Mexico, from any, the Middle East. This is about foreign policy and the executive branch of the United States of America, the Constitution, in this case, El Salvador and the United States of America. You can't tell, a district court judge cannot tell the president not to speak to Bukele of El Salvador. That's what this is about. So it's foreign policy. Sorry, it's Article 2 of the Constitution. You can't, a judge cannot tell the president how to conduct foreign policy. End of story. That's exactly what this is about, okay?
This is also about this particular judge, is it not? I spoke with the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the House, Jim Jordan, the other day, and he went through other acts that this same judge has done to prove that this is just another activist that is trying to resist President Trump. Here's Jim Jordan. Watch.
This is the same judge, by the way, Maria, who a few years ago, when there was information taken to the FISA court that was false, the guy who falsified that information, this lawyer, Kevin Kleinsmith, basically Judge Boasberg gave him a slap on the wrist. So this is that same judge. Don't let the hardened criminals leave, even though the head of the executive branch, Article 2, Section 1 says executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States. This is his prerogative. He followed the law. He did this. This judge says, no, no, no. Bring the hardened criminals back. Bring the gang members back. And we're going to have a hearing on it. I think it's set for next Friday. This is why the American people support what President.
The judge said, bring the flights back. You can't just do that. That's about foreign policy. If the United States and El Salvador decide that you have flights going from one country to another, the judge can't stop that. That's within the executive branch privileges of the Constitution. Now, the Supreme Court is the ultimate. The Supreme Court decides the judicial review, the constitutionality of a law. or of a specific action within, government. So, and you had AOC saying, don't listen to the Supreme Court. Nobody in Trump's administration, no supporter of Trump is saying that.
Trump is doing and are fed up with these judges. Now, we took some action a couple of weeks ago in our committee. We said these federal judges, these district federal judges who issue some kind of injunction, some kind of hearing, or some kind of decision, I should say, that decision should only apply to the parties of the case in that respective jurisdiction, not have nationwide implications.
So, AG, you're pushing back. What's the timing on this? How does this play out?
Well, I mean, honestly, the states have joined in an amicus brief in support of the administration and the Department of Justice. I'm so proud of what Pam Bondi's doing to defend President Trump's executive order. Again, we hope that the Supreme Court will receive this pleading immediately and reverse what this judge has done. Again, the Supreme Court in other cases, like in Trump v. Hawaii, where Clarence Thomas signaled that these nationwide injunctions or injunctions that are filed by federal judges are getting a little bit too popular. This is something that the framers of the Constitution never envisioned, and that the Supreme Court should weigh in at some point. So if Clarence Thomas was serious when he said that in this.
The injunctions are designed to act like a congressional bill, a law passed by Congress. But they're not, the judicial branch doesn't make laws, Congress does. If Democrats want to run and campaign on keeping undocumented immigrants who are gang members, they should simply pass those laws, run on those laws. AOC, Bernie Sanders, Schumer tomorrow should simply say, look, we think what Trump is doing is authoritarian. We're going to pass a law. The Democrats are going to push a law that says if you're an undocumented immigrant, Trump has no right, the president has no right to deport you even if you committed crimes. Go ahead and pass the law. There are no law. I don't believe there are any laws that say that. But if you're a Democrat, run on it, campaign on it, believe what you claim to believe in, which they don't believe in anything they claim to believe in. They don't believe in anything because they're embarrassed by all their policies. They're embarrassed by the actual value system of the Democratic Party. So they wouldn't campaign on any of this. They just want to oppose Trump. When it suited them, they wanted to ignore the Supreme Court. And now they're, so what happens if Trump defies the court? It's like, well, you just 2 seconds ago, you wanted to ignore the AOC said ignore the Supreme Court, and like a bunch of clapping seals, nobody said anything, like, and they just start clapping and agreed with it. So anyway, let's continue.
In that briefing, the Trump v. Hawaii case a number of years ago, I would like to see the Supreme Court smack down this judge's order and then rightfully put the Trump administration back in the driver's seat and protecting and promoting the national security for the United States.
I know, but we've already heard from Chief Justice John Roberts. He issued a rare statement. He never does.
That was because he doesn't want to be inundated with all these, to have to look at the constitutionality of the injunctions. So the only reason he said that is like, please just don't impeach him. Just deal with it yourselves. Because the Supreme Court is going to back Trump on these things. This isn't like a student loan issue, which should have been a bill passed in Congress. Student loans don't fall within the executive branch. Dealing with other countries' foreign policy, immigration laws do fall within the executive branch.
But he did here after President Trump called for the impeachment of Judge Boasberg. He writes this: it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose, AG.
Well, in that's exactly what I was actually talking about, that the Supreme Court has the ability to reverse actions on what these district court judges are doing. I mean, honestly, he was talking about impeachment. I'm talking about the Supreme Court basically putting the court system back on the tracks, slapping these judges down when they try to do these injunctions against the Trump administration from actually performing its Article 2 functions in promoting and supporting national security and defending the safety and health of the United States. This is something that I actually fully support. I saw how the Democrats weaponized the impeachment process against Donald Trump, and I abhor that. I found it reprehensible. So I am loath to go down the road of impeachment, but I do think the Supreme Court, which I'm fully supporting, has a way to go back and slap down this district court judge in the D.C. circuit, slap them down, allow the Trump administration to move forward on promoting the national security of the United States. And that's why 26 states are supporting this executive order.
I see. And so how long will the appellate process take, do you think? I mean,
Also, the district judge wants answers to those questions. Well, these are 10 questions. You better answer them now. He wants the answers so he can say, well, you should have abided by my ruling. And there's like a 2% chance he's like, well, you know what? We're going to issue an arrest warrant. And so the left will be like, yes, oh my God, thank you. But the DOJ wouldn't enforce it. And then it would go to the Supreme Court and they'd slap it down like they did with Jack Smith's case and the Colorado State Supreme Court. The Democrats don't realize that they're always on the wrong side of history, almost always, recently. Maybe not maybe not 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But in modern times, they're always on the wrong side of history, okay? And they're on the wrong side of the Constitution. That's why they continually get defeated by the Supreme Court. The only thing they have is the lower courts, which by AOC said, oftentimes are partisan.
Ordinary citizens understand that there are gang members running around in big cities in America, and they came into this country illegally. And I would say most ordinary Americans want to see them leave. But the timing of this and the legal proceedings is going to take much longer.
Not necessarily. The court can move as fast as it wants to. And so this could go very quickly. Again, Tren de Aragua is not a gang. It's a transnational criminal organization. It's a foreign terrorist organization. It's no different than Osama bin Laden or ISIS walking our streets.
That's a good point, because they were recently deemed a foreign terrorist organization. So in that regard, maybe things changed there, and you're able to be successful. All right, we'll be watching that one. AG, you're also leading a coalition of 15 attorneys general supporting the DOJ's joint task force to.
So you see it right here. AOC urges Biden to ignore Texas ruling. Okay. And then she urged Biden to ignore the ruling on Dobbs. So let's continue. To my super chat. Thank you, by the way.
There were 261 illegal MS-13 gang members, some MS-13 ringleaders. Donald Trump is calling them terrorists because many of them don't have America's best interest in mind, and they're here illegally. So he puts them on planes, he sends them to El Salvador, and in the middle of those flights, a judge says, no, you have to stop, you have to turn these planes around. And then Donald Trump says, well, they're not in American airspace anymore, so it's too little too late. The judge is now giving Donald Trump until noon today to file briefings and to answer these 4 questions. Do you want to read these questions?
Yeah, so he has a few questions. He says that he wants to know how many planes departed the United States.
The president is not going to answer any of these questions. You have a problem with Tesla dealerships getting attacked and a whole bunch of other things. So he's not going to answer these questions, especially when they're international concerns as well. You have the president of El Salvador, the president of the United States of America involved. So you have the people who are flying the planes. You have law enforcement in El Salvador, you have law enforcement in the United States of America. I mean, there's a million reasons from a security standpoint and national security standpoint, from the perspective of both nations, that you wouldn't want to answer these questions. But again, the judges are trying to stop Trump. They're not trying to enforce any laws or uphold the Constitution. They want to stop Trump. The Democrats are not only weak, they're completely inept and in utter disarray. I listen to a bunch of like left-leaning podcasts just so you don't have to. It's like it's watching a horror show. And it's like they're looking at graphs and they're looking at different graphs and different data points, and they're wondering, well, why is it that 20-year-old men, by a 20% margin, are voting Trump? Why? Why is it that, all of these demographic groups are voting Trump? What was it exactly? Because the price of eggs hasn't gone down that much. Like, no, the Democrats are so utterly corrupt. They created a Cold War, a renewed Cold War because they lost. They accused Trump of being a Kremlin operative. Only an imbecile would believe that. They condemn and judge and pontificate and preach, and it's a religion. They disown friends and family, lifelong friends, disowned with a text message. I mean, we've all experienced that. They don't go to Thanksgiving. They write articles on how you should divorce your Trump-supporting husband. And it's like it's gone off the deep end, and they're like, geez, these data points. I just don't understand how Harris lost. Well, number one, she didn't win a primary. Biden did. Number two, you told us that Biden was of sound mind for 4 years. Then we all saw it. Then you allowed, thank God, the Democrats and George Clooney allowed us to believe our lying eyes. And so we could actually say in public that Biden was one fry short of a Happy Meal. That was the one silver lining of Democrats turning on Biden. It was like, oh, finally, we're not condemned. We're not insulted and condemned as conspiracy theorists for pointing out that this man is, shaking hands with ghosts. So it's like, anyway, let's continue.
At any point on Saturday, Karen, any people being deported solely on the basis of this proclamation. He also wants to know how many people in the category were on each plane, what foreign country or countries did these planes land in.
The DOJ is not going to answer any of this. Nothing. You will get no answers. Number one, just to slow down the process. Number two, all of these would put people at risk, people at serious risk. It would probably put the president and both countries, all of the people involved, at serious risk. But I mean, what does the judge care? He just wants to stop Trump. Almost certainly. Of course, the judge cares very much about people's lives.
And what time did these planes take off from the United States and from where?
Well, and here's the thing. This all came to a head on Saturday night, and it is because late Saturday, just before the flights took off, apparently the ACLU and another group sued the federal government, and they went before the judge, and they started talking about what to do. And the judge issued an order from the bench. It was an oral order. He said, okay, turn those planes around. And now the White House says, well, it wasn't until, it didn't take effect essentially until the written order came out. So right now, it's all about the timeline and stuff. Ultimately, what the judge wants.
The judge has no right to turn planes around. That's,
to know is whether or not that original lawsuit where the ACLU filed against the federal government to keep 5 Venezuelans off the plane, he wants to know whether or not those people went on the plane. From what I've read, it sounds like they did not make the trip. And so that should satisfy him. And ultimately, the federal government has broad latitude when it comes to enforcing immigration and stuff like this. So it'll be interesting.
This has to do with 2 countries, 2 leaders, Bukele and Trump. It has nothing to do with judges. Nothing. Article 2 of the Constitution, the United States Constitution.
Interesting to see what happens today.
And remember who this judge is. He's an Obama-appointed judge who actually gave Kleinsmith. He was the guy who made up the whole FISA warrant, reversed what it actually meant, and allowed Carter Page to be surveilled illegally. He basically got a slap on the wrist. Remember, also, this judge has got a wife who's a radical leftist, Hillary Clinton, a huge Hillary Clinton supporter. He seems to be an activist judge, and he seems to be really getting ahead of himself on how much weight he actually carries in terms of foreign policy with America. Here's our press secretary yesterday.
These are heinous monsters, rapists, murderers, kidnappers, sexual assaulters, predators who have no right to be in this country, and they must be held accountable.
Is the administration prepared to give the court what it wants in terms of the time of the flights that departed, that went to El Salvador, and some of those details that the judge is asking for in trying to determine the timing? The verbal order did say turn around the flights if there's an issue. So is the administration prepared to provide that information?
I'm prepared to provide it right now. All of the planes that were subject to the written order, the judge's written order, took off before the order was entered in the courtroom on Saturday, and the administration will, of course, be happily answering all of those questions that the judge poses in court later today.
They're not going to answer any questions, but that's fine. They're going to cite national security concerns. They're not going to answer specific, they're not going to give specific timelines, and you're talking about a sensitive national security, these are national security operations. So, you know, if the United States of America can't even ensure the safety of Tesla dealerships, which, by the way, the Kash Patel and the Federal Bureau of Investigation and others should protect property and innocent lives, being targeted by Democratic Party leaning activists, but if you can't ensure that Tesla dealerships are safe, you ain't going to give anyone the specific information about a national security military operation.
I just don't think you're going to get much sympathy from the American people when they see a bunch of criminals on a plane. First of all, everyone agrees that all of these people that were taken to prison are illegally in the country. All right, that's not under dispute. When it comes to the briefing that Steve was alluding to, we're talking about 5 people on separate planes. Right. All right. So it's one thing to object to a few people on the plane, but to say that all of the planes full of MS-13, Trinidad that have been...
Why would you be upset about that?
Why would you say bring those people back to the country? It just doesn't make any sense.
So let's put it this way. Everybody knows the injunctions filed against this administration is setting all times of records. Yeah. They're doing everything possible to stop the total Trump agenda in a way in which is just stunning today. You talk about 64 injunctions out of the 127 nationwide injunctions. All since 1963, there's been 127. There's been 64 just against Trump. These guys are gone for good.
Now, there are 200.
The way he war.
Not as old as Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
Right. So ridiculous,
And by the way, like I said, God bless all, I have to say this, God bless all the wonderful, beautiful, 99.9% of families and people from Venezuela, El Salvador, Mexico, all the Latinos and people from the Middle East who are here undocumented, documented, legally. These are wonderful, beautiful, amazing people from Venezuela, beautiful, wonderful people from El Salvador, Mexico, Middle East. Okay, none of this has to do with hardworking families, documented or undocumented, okay? This has to do with if an American goes to Venezuela or an American goes to any country in the world and they have a criminal record, that country is going to deport the American. This is part of the Constitution. It has nothing to do with, the beautiful human beings of a specific group or ethnicity or nationality. Democrats, by the way, if you notice, aren't going there. They're not trying to make this an issue. They're actually not loud at all. They're trying to kind of straddle the fence here because they know that nobody trusts their political party. And here's the thing, like I said, Congress has to do its job. If you're a Democrat and you want to keep undocumented immigrants in the country who potentially committed crimes, potentially part of a gang, then write a bill. It's not rockets. It's hyperbolic. I'm not really being facetious, but if Democrats want to write a bill in Congress protecting, undocumented gang members, they should write that bill. Okay, that's it. But this has nothing to do with like good, hardworking people. God bless them, from Venezuela or El Salvador or Mexico or the Middle East or whatever. Any country in the world. This has to do only with, I mean, it's foreign policy. It's one president, Trump, talking to another president, Bukele, and it's national security and foreign policy. The executive branch, Article 2 of the Constitution allows the president to do this type of thing, and a judge can't stop it. So,
You process an old law, not as old as Constitution. We still pay attention to that, don't we?
So ridiculous, you know. And look, the president,
So the Democrats are like, this is an old law. Like, so is the Constitution, 1789.
His appointments, they're excellent when it comes to media. They answer the questions. They're not afraid of the media, and they have the answers to this. I mean, when you think about it, Ainsley, it's common sense. We don't say anything about the Constitution being too old.
These judges are saying, is it an act of war? Are we in the middle of a war? Who cares? These guys are the worst of the worst. Get them out of our country.
Right.
Most Americans would agree with that.
Right. And you know what? Maybe we have to do a technical declare of war against terrorists.
War against drugs. War against fentanyl.
Let's say ISIS. If there was ISIS, you wouldn't be complaining. Al Qaeda, you wouldn't be complaining. By the way, Pete Hegseth, again, being able to explain himself. Secretary Austin was not able to do that for 4 years. Pete was great on Sunday. You have Tom.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what can I tell you? David, David, thank you. David, thank you so very, very much. Greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. So, AOC urges Biden to ignore the ruling. Oh, there you go. Ignore Texas ruling, ignore the Supreme Court ruling, and there you go. Okay? So, right here, the Rubin Report, resurfaced clip of AOC wanting Biden to ignore courts. So, there you go. And AOC, thank you. God bless you. The best. There's nobody better than AOC. Said nothing. By the way, as somebody long ago who was part of the left, whatever, there's no left really, but considered myself a progressive. There's no progressives. Considered myself a liberal Democrat or progressive or whatever. My whole life I voted Democrat up until I realized it's a cult, and a very harmful religious cult almost. And I said, Trump is great. Look, I mean, record low poverty, and he's stopping and trying to end endless wars. What is wrong with that? They said nothing. The AOC, the Bernie Sanders never defended Julian Assange. They never defended whistleblowers. They never defended anybody that it was really trying to, shed light on corruption. They don't even have a functioning primary. I am the only person on the planet Earth in the known universe talking about the Democratic primary. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody. But I keep telling you, I keep talking about it, even though nobody cares. They don't have primaries. Is this bad? Yes, it's very bad. You can't have a political party with no primary, because the cream has to rise to the top. Okay, the best person has to win. And in this case, Biden was the best person the Democrats had. He won his primary every state. Okay, Bernie Sanders could have won, but Bernie Sanders is who he is, and there you go. So AOC stated, and by the way, David, thank you. I'll just call you David Kopp. Thank you. AOC stated that Biden should ignore court rulings. Now that's the basis of President Trump's current administration. Thank you, AOC. Hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you all. What a wonderful, and like I said, again, the beautiful, wonderful people from Venezuela, from El Salvador, from Mexico, from the Middle East, beautiful, amazing people here, whether you're undocumented immigrant or immigrant who did it legally in the right way. God bless you all. You have a lot to be proud of. amazing culture, amazing food, wonderful people, beautiful history, intelligent, educated, wonderful, hardworking, entrepreneurial. Okay, this story is about foreign policy, Article 2. Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution. Hit subscribe to this channel. Thank you, everybody. God bless you all.